Hi there, everyone, and welcome to what I think is episode 15 of the Alder Hour. So, the daylight saving disparity between the US and the UK has equalized. So, I can safely say that it's 8 o'clock here in the UK. It's a little bit earlier across the USA, but this is still your favorite way to end your working day. I'm Matt Alder. I host the Recruiting Future podcast, and of course, I host the Alder Hour, which you're watching right now. This show is part of the Purple Acorn Network. If you want to find out more about Purple Acorn, just head over to Purple Acorn Network. Purple Acorn Net. See, this is live. You can tell now. PurpleAcornNetwork.com after the show. Make sure you do it after the show and not now. You can also follow them on LinkedIn. And this episode is also available as a podcast wherever you get your podcasts. So if you're watching the show live, we really want you to join in. We have got some fabulous discussion and content coming up this week. I want to know what you think. So please post your thoughts, your views in the comments, and we'll try and read them out as we go along. So without further ado, I would love to invite my amazing co-hosts onto the show. Hey, how are we doing? Rona, you are back. You've returned. Is your voice back?
Yes, I'm back and my voice is back. I'm so excited to be here today.
Fantastic. So how many interviews did you actually record at Transform? Because I think that was the origin of your vocal problems.
Probably. So street interviews, about 30.
Wow.
And podcast interviews, I think 4 or 5.
Wow. I did 6 because I published them yesterday over 2 days. So that is an incredible work rate, and we're all looking forward to seeing them when they're out. And Robin is back with us for a second week, showing your flexibility. You're doing the Situation Room for us tonight. How's your week been?
My week has been great. I just put on everybody's hats because last week I was pretending I was Rona because she couldn't talk. I like how she didn't say I was shouting at Timbaland, and that's why I couldn't talk. But this week I'm here for Jocelyn, and
much as we miss Jocelyn and hope she's back next week, it's always good to see you. So, what have you got for us coming up, Rona? What's your segment about this week?
Well, it's open season on middle management, and I'm talking all about it.
Interesting. Robin, what about you?
And we're going to be talking about what to do when communication styles differ and emails kind of go sideways.
Yes, that should be interesting. I can't believe that in 20, 30 years we still can't get email right. But we can talk about that a little bit later. Fantastic. So really looking forward to it. And we have the one and only Jim Stroud as our guest coming on later. So looking forward to catching up with him as well. So let's move on to our first section, which is Points and Pints. Okay, so if you've not seen this part of the show before, well, if not, why not? But if you haven't, what we do is we get our favorite drink and we drink it, we open it, and we drink it while we look at some of the headlines that we found in the news this week. So my drink this week is the Brooklyn Brewery Special Effects Hoppy Lager, again, as ever, alcohol-free or very, very low alcohol. Interesting, this one, obviously an American beer. However, it is distributed by a company based in the north of England and brewed in Sweden. So I'm not quite sure what to think about that, other than, perhaps people should point out to certain world leaders that the world economy is truly global. But anyway, that's probably a whole nother conversation. So let me just open this. I'm trying to open it on camera, but I don't want to get it everywhere. There we are. Right, let's have a look. I've not had this one for a while. Okay. Oh, there we are.
It looks delicious.
Yeah.
It is fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. One of my favorites, definitely. I've not had that for a while, so that's good. What's it, Robin? You're drinking coffee, aren't you?
Coffee. 2 p.m. coffee. 2 p.m.
Cool.
my time coffee.
That's cool. How do you take your coffee? How do you make your coffee?
I've got some sugar in there, and then I have a frother, and I froth my half and half, and I put that on top.
Nice. Rona, what do you have?
So I'm trying out a new one. It's the Free AF Whiskey Ginger Mocktail.
Wow.
We'll see. Whiskey at
Wow.
2 p.m. Why not?
Yeah. Well, tell
Ooh.
us, try some and tell us what you think. Okay, so let's move on to our first headline, which is I had that down as our second headline, but it's fine. We'll just do this one first. So Bill Gates, he has been all over the news in the last few days because he did an interview where he talked about the incredible potential of AI. And there were two things that kind of came out of this interview, and depending which sort of press you read, some of them focused on the fact that he said all but 3 types of job will be eliminated. But we picked this one because I really like the idea. So basically, he's saying that AI is going to take us to a 2-day week, which is really interesting. So a few things to say about this. I think that first of all, I always kind of attach quite a lot of credibility to what Bill Gates says, not just because he's Bill Gates, and obviously he's been there and done it, but he wrote a book probably 20, 30 years ago now called The Road Ahead, which was really, really kind of precise in predicting lots of things that have happened. And I used to work in one of his companies about 20 years ago, and maybe longer, but a long time ago. And there was this whole thing about micropayments and the microeconomy, which we were sort of working on at the time, which has kind of obviously exploded into e-commerce as we know it. So always have a lot of kind of interest in what he's saying. But I think it really underlines how much we are actually underestimating AI in this kind of medium to long term, because obviously, wherever you go at the moment, everyone's talking about AI, but no one's really talking about AI as much in these kind of terms, in terms of, is it eliminating jobs? How do we think about that? How are governments planning for that? Is it going to take us to this world of leisure that computing was always going to and never did? And I just think it's really interesting from that perspective, because I think if you go back 20, 30 years and we looked into the future, we kind of all thought we were going to be a bit like the Jetsons in terms of the way that life would be very, very different. But I think when you sort of talk to people about this kind of impact and this sort of stuff happening, people just don't engage with it. They don't sort of take it seriously in that sort of medium term. So lots of things here. I've got a few more things to say, but I'm interested to know what what you think. Rona, what do you think of Bill Gates and his 2-day work week and AI reworking the entire world as we know it?
I mean, I'm game for a 2-day work week. I think we all are. Like you said, I mean, I envisioned us with the flying cars and the robot housekeeper and all of these things. So if the benefit of AI, yes, it's going to take jobs. I agree. It's like it's inevitable. It's going to happen. But if the benefit ends up being less work for us, like the 2-day work week, less burnout, and all the things that were mentioned in the article, then yeah, I'm game. Do I think it's going to happen?
That's the question.
I don't know if while I'm in the workforce, it will, but hopefully it does for the next people coming along.
Robbie, what do you think?
Yeah. Two things struck me about this. One is, the first is the corollary that duties will expand to fill the time allotted. So I think it's like, we got vacuum cleaners, but we still spent, the same amount of time cleaning our houses, right?
Yeah.
So I think duties will expand to fill the time that we're told to be at work, right? The second piece that strikes me is, if we collectively as a society move towards this, to, let's say, march down the road to a 2-day work week, where does our income come from to replace that? It becomes the question then, perhaps, of a universal basic income coming in to fill that gap. If I'm only needed to work 2 days, but I'm used to, more than twice that income, where's that going to be made up? Is there UBI? Some of the cases for UBI, I think, are similar to this scenario then, which is, you know what, if there's UBI, people will do more creative things. We'll get more art. We'll get more people writing books or writing music or doing investments in their community or something. So I think it's, how do we fill that time, and how do people live on 2 days worth of pay?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. I think it also underlines that there's this kind of real disconnect about, Bill Gates is talking about this. He could have been talking about this 30 years ago. And so in 30 years' time, we'd do this. And we'd all kind of nod and go, yes, that sounds feasible. But he's not. He's talking about 5 years' time, 6 years' time. And there is no roadmap to get there. There is no discussions about this. There's no plan from governments, from education, from companies. It's just sort of sitting there as, oh yeah, well that kind of makes sense. But as you say, that's the rockiest road imaginable to get to a position like this. And it just really concerns me that no one is having, no one with any influence is having a conversation about what the transition to this kind of future looks like. And I think that's the bit that scares me, rather than the capability of the machines. I think it's just the fact that no one's kind of considering those kind of steps. And also, I think it's the same in recruiting as well. I think that AI is going to fundamentally reinvent it. Yet we're kind of sort of obsessed with all the little micro things about, can it schedule this better? Can it make this more efficient? And there are much bigger changes going on. I picked out a quote which I think sums up the disconnect between what people think is going to happen in the future and how they're getting there. So this is a quote from Jamie Dimon, who's the CEO of JP Morgan. And the quote says, this is from this article, he also expressed his view that AI will make working less of a priority, placing his bet on a 3.5-day week. However, there's no indication that his company is heading in that direction anytime soon, due to the new enforcement of the strict 5-day return to the office policy. So I think that just kind of sums it up, doesn't it? Absolutely sums it up. And speaking of JP Morgan, let's move on to the next one, because I think this is kind of interesting. This is interesting as well. So this article. And obviously this is a huge conversation that is happening everywhere at the moment. JP Morgan trades DEI for DOI, swapping out equity for opportunity. So a couple of things on this from me. I think obviously all the fallout around D&I continues, and I think it's things like this that really bring home that this is not just a US thing, because these global companies are changing their policies globally, and that's kind of having effects in lots of other countries, even countries where DE&I is still considered to be incredibly important. So I think there's a bit there. The other thing as well. In some respects, it's great that they're not sort of abandoning the whole thing completely, which a lot of big companies sort of seem to be sort of rolling back from, but really kind of swapping equity for opportunity. Does that just kind of undermine the point of it? Because if you're giving people the same opportunity, that's great, but if you're not taking into account where they're coming from, or some of the systematic issues or allowances that you might have to make to help people kind of really perform, then I just think it kind of questions the effectiveness of the whole thing. And I think the other interesting thing is one of their reasons for doing this is they say it aligns with what they were doing anyway. And I also wonder whether that is a more accurate representation of where employers were with this, and they weren't actually doing what they said they were doing. Robin, what do you think about this particular thing?
When I read this, I was torn because I don't dislike at all incorporating the word opportunity into the conversation. And I like that they're talking about it in that way. I still am in all kinds of moods when I look back. Really, it's really been within the last 12 months where we've taken this hatchet to just even conversing about equity.
Mm.
And this is still yet another trickle down, watering down of something that is core to what we should be about in the world of HR and talent, right?
Yeah.
And that is equity and equitable opportunities and the whole horror, equitable outcomes. My God, don't say that, right? So I hate that it continues to water down. I also do give them a reluctant pat on the back, to your point, Matt, of not eliminating it altogether, keeping the conversation alive.
Mm.
And they are living in this um, world, especially a large organization like that. And he, in particular, he's on all various assorted task forces and whatnot with the administration. The sad world is under the microscope sometimes with some of these
Mm.
things. So probably a little bit of courage for them to knuckle down on this. I'll
Yeah.
give them that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair point. And for me, I think if we relate this to his quote from the previous article about the, 3.5 days, but actually 5 days, I just think that we were getting to a point where we were really starting to challenge workplace practices and ways of thinking about work. Not even necessarily just from an equity perspective, but from this really isn't a very efficient or good way of doing things. And I think it really sort of helped that conversation along. And to me, if you combine it with that, everyone needs to be back at their desk 5 days a week. It just feels like a backwards move from where we were getting to. Rona, what do you think about this one?
This one's tough for me because I see where you guys are coming from. I actually would prefer if people would just say that they're dropping it. Because this whole, we're doing it, we're changing the word, we're watering it down, we're like appeasing everyone and no one at the same time. It's like, guys, you
Yeah,
either
that's
are
true.
doing it or you're not doing it.
Yep.
And that's the thing for me. It's like, to me, it's not courageous. It's not really standing on what they were claiming to believe. It's like, if you're not going to do it, don't do it. Let's not try to call it something else and make everyone feel happy about it. That's my stance on it.
Mhm.
So I'm with companies that are like, either say you're going to do it and this is what we do and this is why we believe in it, and whatever happens in the world, then we're just going to deal with it.
Yep.
But this whole trying to like make it, I don't know, so that
Mm.
everyone can be, it's not my thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think it comes back to that whole thing about the where they say, "Oh, this is kind of more in line with what we were doing anyway," which is not actually doing what they said they were doing. So
Right.
So yeah, this kind of rumbles on, as you say. Different employers are taking different different routes around this, and I'm full of immense kind of respect and admiration for the companies that are sticking to their guns and just doing this regardless, because it's the right thing to do. It's as simple as that. So quite the situation. So let's move on to the situation room.
Ooh.
So the depths of Reddit. What have we found this week?
I could plumb those depths forever because it's there's always something good, right? So this week we have a situation. This is a small business. Okay, so I think you got to keep that in context to start with. Person A, I call her Alice. It works for this small business. There are only 3 employees, including herself, who are regularly in the office, right? So everybody else is in the field elsewhere doing things. So Alice also works with Betty. Call her Betty. And Betty is currently out of town for 10 days. Alice is covering her role. They will do this for each other.
Okay.
Usually very separate roles, little overlap, but they can cover for each other. Anyway, Alice and her day-to-day, usually email conversations that she gets from staff, very kind, very gracious, very helpful, very polite. Now that she's getting Betty's emails, she sees that the interactions via email that Betty has with staff are of a totally different variety, very rude, condescending, lacking basic politeness. you name it. And so Alice, in addition to doing Betty's work, is just wrapped up in these emails and wondering, why is this communication style so incredibly different?
Mm.
Is it a matter of age? Is one path that Alice went down. Now, I don't see this as being a huge age gap, but Alice is 42, Betty is 27.
Yeah.
So Alice is thinking maybe Betty's relative youth, people are, that's just how they talk,
Yeah.
unknown.
Yeah.
And then the secondary issue to this is, not only is this tone of the emails very different, but Alice is discovering that Betty has an enormous, enormous workload.
Right.
Just so Alice is ending the day just exhausted, to the point where she's thinking, I think Betty probably even needs an assistant. It's that
Mm.
crazy. So it brings up a couple of things. One is, kind of, how does this get it? How should Alice address this? And I think it's really kind of two issues: the rudeness, the condescension, the tone of interactions. Alice wants to know how to address that. Alice
Yeah.
also wants to know how to address the workload issues. Doesn't seem like they're necessarily managers of each other. They truly are coworkers.
Yeah. 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 Ah, interesting.
Yeah.
And yeah, because it doesn't really say whether one's been there longer than the other
Mm-mm.
one, or anything like that. And do you think it's because I suppose, so many kind of business interactions are hidden behind email.
Yes.
It's just that, Betty doesn't actually know that there's another way of doing things in that, or that there is a difference between them,
Hmm.
or actually she's taking on an unfair workload. Obviously, there must be a manager there somewhere who sends messages to both of them, who would have a kind of a take on that, but is
Hmm.
ignoring it. There's not a huge amount to go on. It's not a
No.
very long post, but I was going to say, what do you think's happening? But perhaps, what real issues do you think it kind of brings up that
Yeah.
you've seen sort of
Yeah.
in other contexts?
I think, Alice is, it's enough of a dichotomy that Alice is struck by it, right? So I think the first thing that Alice should do to kind of put her mind at ease is to, um, use her interactions with these folks through Betty's emails to set some boundaries, right? Some polite but firm boundaries. And of course, all of these things depend on, Alice's comfort level, kind of, the workplace dynamics. Again, we don't know a whole heck of a lot, but if I were Alice, right, I would kind of, model that respectful communication back to these people that are being rude or condescending.
Mm,
Hey, I'm
mm,
happy to help. Um, you know, Look forward to being of assistance, whatever, right? You start to kind of model that behavior. And then as part of that, if it's appropriate, I think Alice can start to give feedback. Hey, Bob, just a reminder, let's keep our emails, respectful, whatever. Not a
yeah,
lecture, not coming
yeah,
in being the school marm, but start to bring up to those individuals, if that's appropriate in that workplace, this is a better way to work. And so I would certainly do that while I'm doing the job. And then prepare to discuss it with Betty when she gets back,
mm,
and
mm,
give Betty some tips on how to navigate this. And this might be where, again, we don't know. Somewhere there's a manager, one would assume. Where
yeah,
does that manager come in?
yeah,
How is that issue raised? Um, Betty may not. Betty may be cool with the, sort of, rude tones, but Betty may also not be cool at all with that. And
yeah,
Alice needs to check on that, or have the manager check on it. And so I think that's the first thing that comes into play when Betty gets back after her 10 days off. Is this okay? Is this how everybody talks to you? Um, you do realize that we try to be a little more respectful of each other. And you just need to kind of talk it through, and start going down that path. Make sure that Betty knows she can advocate for herself, that she can raise those issues. Maybe Betty never thought she could say anything.
Yeah, no, exactly. And there's sort of two things that strike me, neither of which could be happening here, but it just sort of sparks interesting ideas. I think the first one is styles of communication,
Yeah.
because I think the younger people are, the more brief their emails are, because
Yes.
they're kind of used to that sort of short, sort of, more micro conversation style. Whereas, I think I remember when we all got email, it was just like email. It's like an electronic version of a memo. I'm going to write like, dear,
They make it so.
dear sir or madam, please could you do this for me? I remain as ever your most humble servant. All that kind of stuff. So that was kind of one bit. But then I remembered that I kind of read another sort of article once about a man and a woman who'd done something different, or who'd done something so very similar, and sort of swapped emails, but not sort of told anyone. And the man was just kind of aghast at how rude and disrespectful, and kind of the conversation the woman, the communication the woman was getting. So I think there's obviously an element of that here, perhaps around the age or experience, or or whatever, and that's kind of a thing. And I just can we not we're not at the stage where we could use technology to sort of find out. It would be interesting to see how different people are communicated with via email, because it's kind of all there, and just what the issues might be. But yeah, it's a short story. We don't have much information, but it throws up a lot of interesting issues, definitely.
And I do think, it might be age. I don't even know that it's age. This could be people of any age, right? But especially when folks are new to an organization. Again, we don't know if that's the case here with Betty, but when someone is new to an organization, they're trying to work out what are the norms, right? Well, gee, how do people communicate with each other? Maybe this is a really super sarcastic work environment, whatever it might be. Not crude, not mean, not rude, but sarcastic humor, for example. You always have to work your way through understanding the dynamics. And if Betty is working her way through that, maybe she's fine with it. It's still interesting that these people choose to communicate so differently to Betty versus Alice, but we can't assume Alice can't assume Betty is okay with it. And Alice, now that she's aware of it, needs to find a way to open that door and have that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it also, final point, it kind of really, it does show how archaic email is as well.
Yeah.
Because, they should be working on Slack or some kind of open communication platform. Surely that's the answer. Robin, thank you very much for sharing that with us.
Absolutely.
Let's move on to our guest. And there he is. Hi, Jim. How you doing?
Hey, Matt. How are you, sir?
I'm very good. Long time no speak. We were just before we started the show, we were trying to work out where we last met each other face to face. And not only could we not remember when it was, we couldn't remember what country we were in.
It's so true.
So, I mean, just to kick off with, just for people who may not have come across you in your work before, and I can't believe that there are many of them, but can you just introduce yourself and tell everyone what you do?
Sure. My name is Jim Stroud. Most folks call me Jim Stroud. Feel free to do the same. I've been involved in the recruiting industry for about 2 decades, working for such companies as Microsoft, Google, Siemens, and a host of startup companies. Presently, I serve with the pleasure of ERE as the editor of SourceCon. We're putting together a conference, which is a combination of SourceCon, the premier sourcing conference, and ERE, the more traditional sourcing conference. And we have 2 great tastes, put them together, and we're branding it Recruiting Innovation Summit, which is coming up later on this month in Las Vegas.
Fantastic, and it looks like a great event and a kind of a great lineup of speakers, and talk about that a little bit in a second. But before, I think it's just really interesting, because I think every time that I have met you, it's been in some kind of innovative environment. So, first of all, I think we were talking about the internet, then we were talking about mobile, social, then we were talking about mobile, and obviously we're kind of at a whole new sort of fork in the road when it comes to innovation and technology at the moment. What's your take on what's happening in terms of AI and everything that's sort of out there at the moment? Where are we heading with all of this?
Sure, I have a bit of a contrarian opinion. I
I
think
would expect
the
nothing less.
I think the conventional wisdom is that the robots are coming, the robots are coming. Uh, you know, uh, Duck for cover. But I don't think that it will be the case. I don't think the AI will take everybody's jobs away. We'll just do our jobs differently. For example, when I remember when Tilly the Teller, which is the ATM system for the banking systems that we have here, I remember when that first went online. I'm sort of dating myself. I was just a little kid, but I still remember that. And there's a lot of buzz about, well, all the teller jobs are going to go away because now we have, ATMs, and it didn't go away. The tellers just did something different. You know,
Mm, mm,
I remember when Netflix first became popular, and they put Blockbuster out of business, and people said, "Okay, that whole industry is going to go away because now we don't have any more retail, so all those jobs are gone." Well, lo and behold, streaming technologies were developed, and a whole new uh, bunch of jobs came up in their place. So I think AI is going to change the way we work as recruiters, but I don't think that is going to take recruiters and sourcing jobs totally away. I mean, it will just change. And other reasons for that, in addition to the reasons I mentioned, are items like cybersecurity. There always will be
yeah.
cybersecurity issues. Regulation. I think that a lot of regulations that are already in place, there'll be a lot more coming in the near future to make sure that the technology we use isn't biased or doesn't cross ethical lines. That's fair. And then I think also we're going to see um, more of what we're already seeing, which is human beings wanting to do business with human beings.
Mm,
I think
mm,
that I've come across recently some tools that say they can totally automate the entire recruiting function, and I'm fascinated to see those kind of tools. I always want to keep up with what's going on, but
mm,
I don't think people will want to put other human beings out of the process altogether. I think the more technology you put in, the more people are going to want to gravitate to work with human beings. So that's a sort of my contrarian opinion. Also, and I end it with this, so we're going to something else, is that um, people think that AI, some people think AI is a really big danger to our careers in the industry and so forth. And the biggest danger that I see with AI is that it could work too well. That it's too good. And the reason why I say that's the biggest concern is that when I call somebody on my iPhone, I just say their name or I type their name in, and then the call goes through. With the exception maybe one or two numbers, I don't remember people's phone numbers anymore.
yeah,
That's
exactly.
that,
Yeah.
that's a skill I
Yeah.
lost, right? If AI works so well and we become so dependent on it, then we have the capability of losing a lot of the knowledge that we already have. And
Mm,
once we're in a situation where we're so dependent on technology that we lose that knowledge, or we don't know how to do it manually, and then the machine breaks, then what do? We're stuck. So I think that's the ultimate safeguard. AI taking things away. We have to always keep a human being in the loop, because if we lose that knowledge and forget how to do it, machine breaks, and machines are not perfect. They'll break down eventually. We don't want to be stuck in a situation where nobody knows what to do.
yeah, it's such an interesting. It's just so interesting in terms of that because you're absolutely right. It's kind of, in some ways, sort of skills are disappearing. But is it the right time for them to disappear? Is this a kind of a proper robust alternative? And the human brain is quite plastic in terms of sort of forgetting things and learning new skills. And
Oh yeah.
I think the telephone number is always a great example because, again, dating myself, I can remember, back when you could remember everyone's telephone number because it was like a landline number, and people had those numbers for like 30 years and stuff
Hmm.
and stuff like that. So obviously, it's a perfect time to bring people together to have discussions about the future of recruitment and the future of sourcing and all those sort of things. What are you looking forward to about the conference? Is there a sort of particular speaker or a particular theme or something that's happening that you're really kind of looking forward to?
I'm really looking forward to seeing the whole thing because, as I said, we're combining two different conferences. So it's not quite what SourceCon used to be. It's not quite what ERE used to be. It's a totally new entity. But we do have some of the legacy programs with it. For example, the SourceCon Hackathon still, has always been a fan favorite. So if someone ever wondered what's it like to compete in the SourceCon Hackathon, that is still going on. We also have the AI Showcase where people will step up and demonstrate their AI recruiting tool. So if you ever wanted to sort of sit back and say, I wonder what else is out there, what tools are the kids into these days? Well, you can sit back and watch the people from the different companies demonstrate their tool and then answer questions from the audience. Also, in addition to learning about the future of sourcing, to learning about different future aspects of talent acquisition, we're also going to have some fun. We're going to have some bar crawls, we're going to have some cosmic bowling, we're going to have some karaoke going on there. So not only will you attend Recruiting Innovation Summit and learn a great deal with actionable information that you can immediately put to use, you also can have a good time networking with people over fun events and fun happenings. So I'm excited about seeing the whole thing. It's going to be a whole new experience.
Fantastic. And just before I forget, I've got a couple of more things to ask you.
Sure.
Where can people find out about the conference?
Yeah, go to ererecruitingconference.com. That's ererecruitingconference.com. Operator standing by.
Awesome. So a couple of sort of additional things.
Sure.
When you were sort of talking about that SourceCon hackathon and all that sort of stuff, it kind of struck me that I've always loved that because I've always loved watching sources get like so creative with technology and thinking and all that sort of stuff. And what I've noticed about this sort of, I don't know, this sort of first stage of generative AI is there are lots of people with that mindset, finding new tools, pulling things together, building their own AI stacks that actually operate better than some of the big companies. And it just seems like really exciting from that kind of perspective. Are you kind of seeing that sort of happen? Is that something that you might talk about at the event in terms of that sort of creative sourcing mindset in terms of using tools and doing things differently, but with some of the AI stuff that's available?
Yeah, you'll definitely see that with the hackathon because the different challenges that we'll have there, you may go into thinking, well, I'll just have a certain Chrome extension or I'll have some AI tool that'll help me magically solve these challenges. And that won't be the case, at least not in every case. What's the SourceCon Hackathon does is it tests how you think critically. So having a certain tool is great, but if you don't think a certain way, if you're not looking at things strategically and thinking a couple steps ahead, then it doesn't matter how awesome your tool is if you don't have the mindset to leverage it properly. That makes sense.
Excellent. That sounds fantastic. So, just to sort of change gears a little bit as a kind of a bit of a sort of a final discussion.
Sure.
You're sort of famous for your job hunting tips, and that you sort of put out in various different formats over the years. And we kind of have to recognize this is a very tough time for lots of people in the recruiting space at the moment. Still lots of layoffs, big competition for jobs, all that sort of stuff. What would your advice be to people from a job hunting perspective?
Sure. Two things. One, build yourself a job hunting team to work with you. I cannot stress how important that is. I learned this the hard way after suffering multiple layoffs throughout my career. What I mean by a job hunting team, I'll give you a resource where you can get more details on this. But essentially, if I worked at, say, Kroger, right, and I was a cashier, working alongside me would be an assistant manager, somebody stocking the shelves, somebody putting the groceries in the bag. These are people who work alongside me at Kroger, but they don't compete for the same job I have. I think one mistake people do when they're networking for jobs, if I'm a recruiter and I ask another recruiter for leads, well, they're going to naturally want to feed their family first, so they're going to take advantage of the job. But if I team up with people who understand my industry, who work in the periphery of what I do, then we're not competing. We can help each other. So I'll make a list of the different people who work alongside me as a recruiter, maybe a sourcer, maybe an HR generalist, maybe an HR coordinator, a recruiting coordinator, and so on. Build a list of the different job titles that work with me, but don't compete with me for the job I want. Go out on LinkedIn, find people who are open to opportunities and say, hey, I'm building a job hunting team. Do you want to come work with me? And you explain to them what we're going to do is we're going to get together and we're going to figure out our action plan. I'm going to go to the job boards. You're going to go to the networking events. You're going to go to some job fair in your city, what have you, right? We're all going to fan out, do our thing, come back together, share that intelligence. Now, you, as one person working with three people, you've now expanded your job search activities threefold without spending so much money on gas, without using all your time, without going crazy. And then, as you guys share the intelligence, as you eventually get interviews, when you get an interview, you say, "Hey, recruiter, thanks for your time. Can I get 30 more seconds? I'd really like to tell you about this other person I know." Recruiter says, "Sure." You tell them about your teammates. You say, "Great, can I see your resume?" Recruiter says, "Sure." You send them the resume. You copy the person on your team, and you say, "Hey, recruiter, thanks for your time. By the way, if you remember, I mentioned my friend who's looking for a job. Their resume is attached." Send it to that recruiter. The person on your team sees that you sent their resume to that recruiter, and now they feel great. Somebody's looking out for me. I have to do the same for my other teammates. And now when I go out and
Oh,
interview people, I'm going
yeah.
to mention them. So
Wow.
now you're expanding your job search without going crazy. And then finally, as you meet with each other, maybe on a weekly basis, you're there to encourage each other. What did you do this week? Have you tried this? Have you tried that? Or you say, "Hey, I know it's rough. I'm suffering it with you. Let's, keep hope alive. Let's keep encouraging one another." It is um, it is such a help to your mental, such a boost to your mental health to know that you're in this job search of other people working alongside with you who have your back, as opposed to
Amazing. Yeah.
doing it on your own, spending so many hours getting nowhere and just feeling the whole time.
Yeah.
So,
No, that's a
and
great tip. And what was the other one?
the other one is you go to my profile on LinkedIn, find me on Jim Stroud, and there is in the featured section of my LinkedIn profile is a guy with binoculars, and it says the number one job hunting book in the world. That's a free ebook that I'm just giving away. You can download it to get more detail on how to put together a job hunting team, like I rather quickly described. And it goes into more detail. But not only that, there are a bunch of other tips in there that you can use. And I would encourage everyone to download it for themselves and to share it with other people.
Jim, that's fantastic. I'm sure that will help lots of people. And as ever, an absolute pleasure to talk to you. So thank you
Thanks,
very
sir.
much for coming on the show. And let's go to trending or ending. Hi, Rona.
Hey, Matt.
So let's talk about it. Middle management.
Yeah. So it looks like Andy Jassy declared open season on middle managers in a company wide memo. That he's the CEO of Amazon, for those who don't know. He basically said, "Hey, what if we had fewer people managing the people who manage people?" It's like bold move, right? But we've heard this before. I feel like we get into this cycle every few years, then we learn from it and we forget and we end up we forget what we learned and we end up back here again and again and again. We've seen the cycle so many times, like so many other things in our world. And I'm not here to defend bad middle management. We
Yeah.
know it exists. Like we've all had that boss who schedules 12 check-ins a week just to ask you how's it going. Then the next one, why haven't you done what you said you were going to do while you're in that meeting? It's just this cycle. Some people love it, and yes, there's to some extent, there's some truth in like some middle managers aren't really adding to the organization, and it's just a lot of red tape and a lot of I can't say that word today.
Yeah, that's okay.
You know what I
I
mean.
know what you mean. I know what you mean. Yes.
So but let's not pretend that every manager is that way, right?
Mm.
The middle managers are really the glue. They're the buffer. They're the person who knows the name of the guy in finance who actually fixes things. So when Jesse mentions that he wants more people who actually get things done, that really bothers me. He's like, I really hate when
Mm.
people talk
Mm.
about middle management that way. But he said he wants people who actually get things done instead of managing those who manage. And I get it. I get the sentiment. But what we've seen happen we've seen what happens when companies go like full flat org. There's chaos, there's burnout, missed context, and everyone's like, no one knows who actually does anything and who's responsible for anything because there's no glue, there's no middle management there.
Mm,
I think
mm.
if you cut middle management without rethinking how information flows, how decisions are made, and like how employees are supported, you're not just building a leaner company. Like at that point, you're building a confused company. So, is the war on middle managers trending or ending? Unfortunately, it's trending.
Mm,
We
mm.
get it. It happens every few years. The companies that are going to win are the ones that, okay, yeah, we're going to cut it, but we're going to redefine the role of a manager. We're not going to remove it. Like, my question for everyone in the chat and for you, Matt, is like, are middle managers really unnecessary or are they just underutilized? What do you think?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think the problem with this for me is the way he talks about his own team. He's just being incredibly condescending about a whole sort of big section of the company, and just really, yeah, and who knows, it may be how it's being reported, but it just comes across as
Yeah.
quite disrespectful, and also making massive assumptions about what people do, or big generalizations. So I think that actually this kind of process is hugely necessary at the moment, going back to sort of the things I was saying earlier in the show, because we need to think about work differently. We need to think about how we where technology is taking us, and that kind of stuff. But I don't think that blanket generalizations are the way to do it. And I get that these companies want to do things quickly, and then sort of pick up the pieces afterwards. And that's why you get those kind of comments. But really, I think it's actually really analyzing, what do we mean by middle manager? What is it that these people do? And I think just the title itself, middle manager, is just so uninspiring. It just sounds like a horrible thing, someone in the middle who does this. But I was a middle manager for a while, and it's a difficult job. You kind of have to deal with deal with your team and all the things they're sending up to you, and the arguments they're having with each other. And at the same time, you've got to kind of deal with all the information that's kind of coming down, and just make everything kind of work smoothly. So yeah, I think we probably need a really sort of good look at what middle management, for want of a better word, do in these kind of organizations. Because it also struck me that obviously, people look at something like AI and say, hey, communication revolution, knowledge revolution, we don't need these managers anymore because people can just, get the information they need in a different way, or works in a different way. But actually, you think about people coming up through the workforce, two bits to it. First of all, who mentors these people? Who
Mhm.
helps them? Who helps them grow? From a kind of real sort of human perspective. I think that's part of it. Particularly, obviously not in the case of Amazon, because they've gone down there. Everyone needs to be back at the office, presumably so they can spot middle managers and exit them. But in lots of other companies, people are working remotely. They're starting their jobs remotely. They're not having that. They need help and guidance from people. So I think that's part of it. But then the other bit of it is thinking about the traditional career ladder. And I think we had a conversation about this a few weeks ago that said that actually it's not been a thing for a very long time. But where's the kind of aspiration? If you've got these kind of sort of very flat structures, how does that work? How do you progress your career? Have they thought about that in the context of doing this? Because, some people never want to go into management, and that's kind of understandable. But for other people, this is their ambition. They want to kind of go up that mythical corporate ladder, or they want to manage people, and they want to do all those kind of things. And if you just take that away, how do you get the new senior managers for a start? How does that work? So I just think it I can see why people are doing it, but I think that we just need to really understand what is it that layer of management does. Because as you say, every few years people try and eliminate it, and then it ends up coming back. But at the same time, there is a huge amount of sort of bloat around organizations, and smaller organizations do move a lot quicker than bigger organizations because of these things. But they become like that for a reason. I think it's understanding that reason is just the key to it. So again, I think it is trending, unfortunately, but I would hope that other employers are much more mindful about how they do this and the solutions they look for, rather than just kind of ripping out half the workforce and thinking it's going to work.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's very short-sighted. They're especially like in the context of this article, Amazon, I think they're really just thinking on cost savings, and this
Yeah.
is just another way of doing it. Maybe they didn't think about it as they were growing, and now they're trying to course correct, which again, I'm not against. If there's people who are not doing stuff, then yeah, that you should look into that. But the whole blanket statement, and like you said, just the way it was positioned, it's just very disrespectful. And again, we're going to end up in this cycle again because your frontline managers aren't the people at the level that they need to be to do this. So middle management is important. It's just how you're utilizing these people, and how it's structured in your company. So unfortunately, yeah, I agree with you. Like you said, it's trending, but we really need to figure out how to do this the
Yeah,
right way.
and I just think we just need to stop vilifying people because of the job that they do and the assumptions around it. I mean, it's just such a big trend at the moment. And these are humans who've taken a job. This is the CEO of the company who employs these people, who's
Like, you
responsible for
created this
creating these
job.
roles and the success they put into the company. So it's like, let's not be so condescending about people's jobs because things are moving on. Maybe those jobs aren't relevant anymore, but the humans are still relevant. And I just don't know why people would want people to make people feel like this in these kind of processes. And it's a horrible trend that we're seeing everywhere. And I just think that's got to stop because I just don't think it's useful, basically. But anyway, well, thank you very much for that. I think it's a topic that's gonna run, and I would imagine that Amazon are probably the first in a long line of these announcements. So brilliant to have you back, Rona, and already looking forward to trending and ending next week. So
See you next week.
on that note, let's we come once more to the end of the show. Thank you all for tuning in and watching. And if you're watching this on catch up podcast, all that kind of stuff, thank you again for choosing to listen to us. Huge amount of content on Purple Acorn every day of the week. We have the HR Morning Show on Tuesdays. We have Hire Her on Wednesdays. My First Job on Thursdays, and From the Desk with Jada Montemurano on Fridays. So huge amounts of content. Go to the LinkedIn page, trying to get as many followers as we can. So much great content on there. So make sure you follow Purple Acorn on LinkedIn. If you want to listen to my longer form interviews, you can go to recruitingfuture.com, where all my podcasts are archived. And also, if you're looking for podcasts, you can listen to the Alder Hour as well. The Alder Hour will be back this time next Monday, and I'm already looking forward to it. This is Matt Alder, clocking out.